Marie Antoinette. For centuries, her name has pretty much been shorthand for extravagance, for arrogance, for a queen totally out of touch with her people. But what if the story we all think we know is just that, a story, a narrative that was carefully built for a very specific reason? So let's dive in and unravel the fabric of one of history's most famous scapegoats. Ah, yes, the famous line. It's the one thing everyone knows, the quote that is echoed through history books for more than 200 years. It's the ultimate soundbite of a queen so clueless, so detached from her starving people, that she'd suggest something so absurd. It's the quote that really sealed her fate and defined her entire legacy. Except, she never said it. There is absolutely no credible evidence that Marie Antoinette ever uttered those words. None. In fact, a version of that line shows up in the writings of the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and he attributed it to some, quote, great princess, years before Marie Antoinette even got to France. It was basically a pre-existing piece of propaganda, a weapon just waiting for the right person to aim it at. Okay, so if the most famous thing about her is a complete lie, it really makes you wonder, right? What else have we gotten wrong? To find the real Marie Antoinette, we have to go back, way back, long before she was ever a queen. And this is a really crucial shift in perspective. We always think of her as this powerful monarch, but her story really begins with her as a young, vulnerable girl, basically thrown into a world she didn't choose and was in no way prepared for. 14. Just let that sink in for a second. That's how old she was when she was packed up and sent from her home in Austria to France to marry the heir to the throne, the future Louis XVI. She was a teenager, a total foreigner, in a famously difficult and treacherous court. And her whole purpose there was purely political. And this phrase just sums it up perfectly. Her marriage was all about forging an alliance between Austria and France, two longtime enemies. It had nothing to do with her as a person. So from the second she arrived, she was being watched, judged, critiqued. She wasn't a person, she was a symbol. So how does a teenage political pawn become the single most hated woman in all of France? Well, it wasn't an accident. It was a systematic campaign, a character assassination, designed to channel all the public's anger and frustration directly at her. And as you can see, the attacks came from literally every angle. When she and Louis struggled for years to have a child, who got the blame? She did, of course. It was her Austrian barrenness. This very personal struggle fueled a whole industry of nasty, pornographic pamphlets that depicted her in the most vile ways imaginable. Her every move was scrutinized, her every word was twisted. And get this, even her attempts to have some kind of personal control were used as ammunition against her. Her elaborate hairstyles, her lavish gowns, which, by the way, were pretty standard for European royalty at the time, they were all held up as proof of how frivolous and wasteful she was. Her personal style was used to paint her as an out-of-touch foreigner who couldn't care less about France. But to really understand why this smear campaign was so effective, we have to zoom out, because the attacks on Marie Antoinette didn't happen in a vacuum. France was in deep, deep trouble long before she ever showed up on the scene. This slide lays it out perfectly. The public was told to blame her spending for the country's bankruptcy. But the reality? The real reasons were decades of devastating wars, a fundamentally corrupt tax system, and an economic structure that just crushed the poor. You know, it was way easier to get people angry about a queen's new dress than to get them to confront the systemic greed and inequality that were the real source of the kingdom's collapse. And that's really the point, isn't it? She was the perfect target. She was a foreigner. She was a woman in a position of perceived power. And she was highly visible. She became a simple answer to a really complex problem, the face of a crisis she had absolutely no hand in creating. Which brings us to the game end. During the bloodiest part of the French Revolution, Marie Antoinette was put on trial. The official charge was treason, but what she was really being judged for was something much, much bigger. I mean, after all the accusations of bankrupting the nation, of conspiring with enemies, of being a terrible mother, what was the one unforgivable sin she had committed in the eyes of the revolutionaries? Being seen. That was it. Her crime was her visibility. In a time of absolute chaos and collapse, the most visible person becomes the lightning rod for all the fear, all the anger, and all the blame. She was the symbol of the old regime. And in order to create a new France, that symbol had to be publicly and violently destroyed. The source material we're looking at here actually gives her this title, the Woman of Chaos. Not because she created the chaos, but because she was cast as the lead villain in the drama of it all. She became the simple, hateable face for the terrifying, complex collapse of an entire world. And that leaves us with a pretty powerful question to think about. When we look back at history, how often is the person we're all taught to blame simply the one who was the easiest to see? A convenient scapegoat for problems so deep and so systemic, it was just easier to cut off one head than to try and fix the broken body of the state.